Hey guys, welcome back to our ongoing virtual classroom here. So we left off last time talking about how the 90s was really a time of new ideas and new cultures as far as young people go. And with that, we were talking about Mr. William Clinton, also known as Bill Clinton. He was the president at the time. So, like I said, Clinton was doing a pretty good job up until about halfway through his second term. And he got a little bit in trouble. Um, he was accused of having a consensual affair with then 22-year-old White House intern Monica Lewinsky. Now, after she had a few encounters with Bill Clinton, she actually told a staffer about the encounters and was like, hey, this happened between me and the president. Well, the staffer came out and went and told the media, and it became this huge thing. Now, this wasn't the first time that Bill Clinton was accused of some type of sexual scandal. In fact, throughout his decades in politics, he was accused of either sexual assault or rape by a handful of women: Juanita Broderick, Leslie Millwee, Paula Jones, and Kathleen Willey. Now, in 1998, when all this started coming out, Clinton really began his fight against what would be impeachment. Now, why was he impeached in the first place? It wasn't because he had an affair. As wrong as that is, it's not against the law. What happened was, when he was questioned about it, he lied. He said, I have never had sexual relations with that woman. And that's perjury, which means you're lying under oath. Um, so this led into an impeachment hearing. Um, Evidence does prove that he was having an affair, and even though it's not against the law, like I said, he is impeached on the grounds of perjury. You can't lie under oath. Now, this when this went to the Senate. Now, okay, we're going to get into the impeachment stuff a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about the Trump impeachment stuff that happened a couple months back. But just so you know, the way impeachment works is there's an impeachment claim, right? And there's a bunch of hearings that go through Congress, specifically um, the House of Representatives. So it goes to the House of Representatives, and then they decide, okay, we're going to impeach or we're not going to file uh, these articles of impeachment. After that, it goes to the Senate, and then the Senate has the final say on either a president is removed from office or not. So, um, once these impeachment stuff, it actually ended up going to the Senate with Clinton, and they need a two-thirds majority, which means let's see, there's a there's 100 people in the Senate, so you need something like 70 or so. I don't want to do math, it's late. But he doesn't. He only gets it's 50-50 split, and he is able to continue on with his presidency until the end of his second term. Now, it does really kind of leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth. People are like, oh, Clinton's bad. But Clinton wasn't a terrible president. He just, towards the end of his presidency, got rolled around through some mud. It happens. So moving forward, you guys, I don't think you were alive for this stuff, but that's okay. I'm talking about Y2K. I think you guys were born a couple years after the year 2000. But in 1999, the year 2000 is coming, and people are freaking out. They thought the world was going to end. They thought the new millennia was going to begin with all the computers and everything that people trust and use is all going to just shut down. Everything's going to fail. And since we're all connected through computers, when midnight hit, it was going to be a technological apocalypse. Missiles would fire and there'd be nuclear fallout, electricity would all die, and mass hysteria would ensue. Nothing happened. But it was important to know this. And you guys lived through something similar. If you guys remember back to 2012 when people were thinking about, oh, the Mayan calendar is going to end, nothing happened. Y2K was a similar thing. Now, why do people think this? There's a couple reasons, but the one that I kind of think is the most reasonable and what I've heard the most is on computers, it only went to 99, the year. So, like uh, 12/31/99, and they didn't know what would happen when it went to 00, when it freak out and stuff. So it's a really stupid thing, but there was mass hysteria with this. I think my mom, she still has a cabinet in her house, that she calls our Y2K cupboard. Now there's nothing in there, but at the time there was water and some provisions and whatnot. But it was really kind of a freaky time, and people were freaking out. It was intriguing. So the year 2000 came and left, and along with it, there was a new race for president. This was going to be between the Clinton's vice president, Al Gore, and then Governor George Bush. Now, it was a very tightly ran race. Al Gore got 266 electoral votes, and Bush gets 271. Now, I've talked about the Electoral College before, but you need 270 electoral votes to become president of the United States. This is one of the closest um, presidential races ever. Now, Gore's like, you know what? I'm so close, I'm going to call for a recount because I think Florida screwed it up. So it doesn't change anything. Um, Bush inevitably becomes the 43rd president of the United States, and Al Gore is now a climate change activist who talks very slowly and has a wife named Tipper. But it was really interesting, this recount. They were talking. The reason for it is the way ballots were created at the time. I don't have anything near me, but you take a little like pencil or whatever, and you would poke a hole through the name that you wanted. There'd be a little tab in there, and so it was perforated, and you'd punch it out. And if it didn't punch all the way out, it was known as a hanging chad. So they said there has to be all these laying around, so let's go check them out. And like I said, it doesn't change anything for the most part. Uh, Bush becomes president in the year 2000. Now, very shortly after George W. Bush becomes president, um, there's a very infamous day in American history. Now, I don't mean that lightly. Well, there's been really two events in the United States' history that was just it made people stop and panic. The first one was Pearl Harbor, which we've talked about. The second one is going to happen um, on September 11th, 2001, which hopefully you guys know about. If you don't, um, you're going to. So at 8:19 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 is hijacked by a gentleman by Mohammed Atta and a handful of other terrorists. They're gonna fly around for a little bit, and at 8:46 a.m., um, the American Airlines Flight 11 crashes into the 93rd and 99th floors, okay, in between those of the North World Trade Center in New York. People are like, "Oh no!" and they start evacuating the tower as soon as they can. So they start evacuating the North Tower and the South Tower at 9:02 a.m. So as quickly as they can, about 20 minutes or so after the first plane hits, they're starting to evacuate. Um, Now at 9:03, there's another plane that crashes into the South Tower. And this is just absolutely insane. This just keeps happening. Boom, boom, boom. So we have the North Tower gets hit at 8:46. The South Tower gets hit at 9:03. And then there's another flight, Flight 77, crashes into the Pentagon. Three strikes. Now, 9:59, the South Tower collapses, and about 30 minutes later, at 10:28, the North Tower collapses. This was a really interesting day. Now, I can tell you, and most people can that lived through this, they can tell you exactly where they were that morning. Now, myself, I was in seventh grade, and I was woken up. My mom goes, "Hey, the plane crashed into the World Trade Centers." And at the time, I was not the uh, geographical Einstein that I am now, and I had no idea what the trade centers were. And I was like, "Well, that sucks. A plane crashed. Whoop de doo." And then the next plane hit, and it was crazy because they were showing all the footage of the first plane, and so everyone's watching, "Oh, no, what happened?" And then you see this other plane just come out of nowhere and run right in the other tower. It was pretty freaky, to be honest with you. Um, all day in school, we sat and watched the news, and people were panicking. People were freaking out that what was going to get hit next. Because I mean, there were three major crashes, three hijackings within an hour or so of each other. So it was a scary time, and it really would change how America functioned. Now, who did this, right? Well, okay, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Okay. So this comes out, and people don't know who did this. They thought, was it China? Was it Russia? Um, Now it comes out, and it was claimed by them to be part of this terrorist group called Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda. They are part of the Taliban, and they're the ruling party in Afghanistan. It's this whole thing. Now, the Taliban were a group that was in coordination with Afghanistan, so they weren't necessarily in charge or anything, but they were backed by the Afghan government. This was led. Their leader was Osama bin Laden, um, and it was a terrorist organization. They 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 were extreme Islamic terrorists, and they claimed the attacks on the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon. And Osama bin Laden definitely became public enemy number one. But what's crazy about all this stuff is, as freaked out as people were, it really did bring the United States together. And there was a few weird things, right? Like you guys will never know a world where you can go meet people at your airline at the gate of their airplane. Like I remember growing up, we would go stand out like where you get off the plane. We would go stand next to the door and welcome the people there. Now you have to wait till you go through security and all that stuff. But I mean, those are small things. Any case, after all this happened, once the United States knew the identity of the terror group and who were their backers, President George Bush demanded for the Taliban to turn over bin Laden. He's like, "Hey, give me bin Laden or we'll blow you up." Well, after they refused on October 7th, 2001, and this was live on TV, mind you, he says, "If you don't give us a bin Laden, we're going to blow you up." And so it was live on TV, and I remember watching this. It was insane. Tomahawk missiles just rained down from the skies. Like it was like that really ugly night vision green stuff, but you just saw these missiles just blowing up Afghanistan. It was pretty crazy. Now, this invasion was to remove the Taliban from power. Now, they were removed in December of 2001. And at that point, the US then turned to ending terrorist groups in the region, which included Al Qaeda. Um, so you're like, "Hey, Mr. Kneisel, how does that work? You said that we removed the Taliban from power in December of the same year, 2001." Yeah, we did, but we didn't leave, and we started going into more and more stuff, which leads us to Iraq. Now we were still in Afghanistan all the way up into 2003, so we were still fighting these like terrorist satellite groups, even though we already had power. Um, the American war on terror found its way to Iraq. Now, the American intelligence agency believed that Iraq was hiding terrorists and funding their groups, as well as manufacturing weapons of mass destruction, also known as WMDs. Now, the United Nations are like, we're going to come look for them. And they did. And they came, they went to Iraq, and they couldn't find anything. They're like, well, we know they're here, but we don't know if they're here. Um, but by this point, the United States had entered Iraq to overthrow the government for fear that they did have weapons of mass destruction. And they had, the whole terror support system, which was headed up by Saddam Hussein. So, America is in the Middle East, and we are fighting uh, a bunch of terrorists and trying to find terrorists. Now, the information wasn't great. When America came into Iraq, the conflict really did not last very long. The invasion actually started on March 20th, 2003, and really overthrew that entire government by April 9th, 2003. So, less than a month, um Iraq falls. Now, Hussein, on the other hand, escaped Iraq and was hiding. Terror groups that were loyal to Iraq continued to fight and try to hold off the Americans, while kind of hiding Saddam Hussein throughout various places. Now, it wouldn't be until December of 2003 where they would find Saddam Hussein. Now, they found him in a hole near a farmhouse in the Middle East. He's just kind of hanging out in this underground bunker hole. Now they find him. He's put on trial by the Iraqi special tribunal for murder because Saddam Hussein was a dictator and not a nice person. So they hold him accountable, and he's hung in 2006. But we found him, we killed him, and we move on. There's a lot of things that happened while this war on terror was going on. One of these was something called the Patriot Act. This was created in 2002 in response to the whole September 11th attacks. Um, this, this, along with a bunch of new law enforcement branch, Homeland Security, is meant to identify and stop terror attacks in the United States. Now, a lot of people argue that the Patriot Act was unconstitutional. It violated the Fourth Amendment. Which, what's the Fourth Amendment? uh, it prevents the government from unlawful search and seizure. So your property is your property. The government cannot just come take it without some type of probable cause. Now, this did, however, what the Patriot Act did, it allowed for the government to search places, to record phone calls without a warrant or probable cause. So it really does violate the Fourth Amendment. And there was a lot of backlash about this. It was pretty crazy. All right, so we're gonna stop there. We will pick up a little bit later on. Not much happens too much. I mean, there's the war in Iraq and the war in the Middle East, um, but really from 2003 to 2006, it's pretty much the same old, same old. So when we come back, we will start talking about the Great Recession that happens in 2007. We'll be talking about the election of President Obama, and yeah, we're almost done with this stuff, guys. So bear with me. I know this video was a little bit longer, but we are running out of time. We don't have too many weeks left of school, so until next time, we'll see you later. See ya.